Church, Pastor Tim here, our weekly Bridge Gospel reading plan. Just kind of a little recap of what's been happening in our reading this week. Before I do that, I just want to thank again, just publicly thank again, Balaj and Leah, the last couple Sundays, Balaj and Leah, and then Dan and Dina this last Sunday. To just great missionaries that you all support. Just keep them in your prayers. I know both of them, both couples, are just having some challenging opportunities, a lot of stuff going on in their lives, and so just keep them in your prayers. I know we mention them periodically, but just keep them in prayers. I just love them, and that's great that they were able to come and visit us, kind of both back to back there. The Bridge Gospel reading plan. Okay, that's with this last week we were finishing up in Matthew, and then we were starting in Mark, and I love Mark. I love, not that I don't love Matthew, but I love, Matthew is the longest gospel. Mark is the shortest gospel. Mark is kind of like rock and roll, ready to go. Mark doesn't deal with a lot of things that the other Gospels deal with. But I just, this last week we were in Matthew 26. Yeah, Matthew 26 through Mark 2. But in Matthew 26, I kind of find it ironic here in Matthew 26. On my way my Bible is formatted. It talks in Matthew 26 where we have is Jesus is getting ready for the cross. Jesus is getting ready to be betrayed. Jesus is arrested. And so like the rest of Matthew is up through 28 is Jesus' betrayal, death, resurrection. And so it's just like really condensed here. But in Matthew 26, it's like, I was kind of, like I said, with my Bible way it's formatted, it talks about Peter disowning Jesus. And it says basically in Matthew 26, it says in verse 70, he says he denied that he didn't even know Jesus. And in verse 72, again, he denied it. And in verse 74, he said, I don't know the man. I mean, that's coming from Peter, this guy who just before this, not long before this, said, I'll die for you, Jesus. I'll go, everybody else may betray you, but not me, not me. And it's so funny how quickly we can change. But then in the very last verse of Matthew 26, it says when Peter realized what he had done, it says he went outside and wept bitterly when he realized, like, I did what Jesus said I would do. I denied him. I would deny him. He said, I thought I'd never do that. You ever been there? Thought you've done things you thought you would never do? That was Peter. Now you might think that's small potatoes there, but it was huge. He had invested the last 3 years just in the discipleship of Jesus, seeing the miracles, seeing the healing, seeing the water turn to wine, just seeing demons being cast out, just seeing all the miracles and hearing these teachings and receiving the love, but kind of being in the inner circle of Jesus' little disciple group there, and he denies him. But then, like I said, the way my Bible is formatted, then the very next, on that same page, it talks about Judas. Judas Judas arranges to have Jesus arrested, to be betrayed. But it says, in verse 20, chapter 27, verse 3, when Judas realizes that, when he sees Jesus arrested, it says he was seized with remorse. Meaning, and I'm looking at this, I'm thinking Judas was impulsive. Judas, wasn't coming down like with Jesus. Judas probably thought that Jesus marches into Jerusalem. He declares this coup. He's going to take over the Roman, kick the Romans out, and it just wasn't happening like Judas thought. So that's why Judas betrays Jesus. He's thinking like, I'm just going to make Jesus basically come out and come against the Romans, and it doesn't happen that way. So when he finally sees Jesus arrested, 27 verse 3 again, it says he was seized with remorse. And then look at his words in verse 4. These are Judas's words. He says, I've sinned. It says, for I have betrayed innocent blood. He realizes what he's done. I've sinned. I betrayed innocent blood. But what does he do? He throws the rest of the silver back in the temple, basically tries to give it back for betraying Jesus. And he went off and he hung himself. And I kind of call this like the tale of two disciples, because Judas wept bitterly, and he dealt with that dealt with that bitterness until John chapter 21 at verse 15 through 19, where if you kind of follow the story, Peter had been dealing with that guilt up until that time after Jesus rose from the grave and he met the disciples on the beach. And then in John 21, you can read it later, verse 15 through 19, where Jesus reinstates Peter. He restores Peter. He recommissions because it reminds Peter of his mission. But imagine on that on John 21, because I'm always kind of imagining things. What if there were two disciples on that beach, being restored, being forgiven, being recommissioned? See, there could have been Judas there. But Judas maybe didn't feel like he was worthy, which we're not. None of us are worthy. But Judas took another route. But I've always thought about that, like it could have been the story of two disciples there on the beach. What a testimony that Judas would have. What a testimony that these guys would have. It would have been a whole different story. We could have had two disciples there. But then we're starting in Mark now. And again, talk about the tale of two disciples. But here we have Mark, the book of Mark, where this week we're just in the first two chapters. But it's Mark also, this is the same Mark who we've been talking about on Sunday mornings, where with Paul that he was on a missionary journey, the first missionary journey, and for some reason he went home, and that's what caused the dissension between Paul and Barnabas, because Barnabas wanted to take him again and said, no, this Mark bailed on us. Again, we don't know why he went home, whether he was just homesick, whether it wasn't turning out like the way he thought. But this same Mark now writes the Gospel of Mark. See, the Gospels are the story of the people being restored, people being forgiven. At some point, Mark realized he too had blown it. Because we read a couple of weeks ago how many times Paul refers to it later on after that incident where Mark was helpful, Mark was useful. And so that's the story of the Gospels. And so I don't know where you're at today, but maybe you feel like the Judas, and man, I could never be forgiven. Don't go that route, because Peter was the same way. But they both came in a sense they both had the potential to come to the cross. Peter did. Judas didn't. Mark received the forgiveness too for whatever he did. I want to be the Peter. I want to be like Mark. Those times when I've just blown it. Those times when I've like, man, how could anybody forgive me? And yet that's the story of the gospel. That's the power of the gospel, of me repenting of my sins. That's what happened on the beach with Peter, repenting of his sins. I've blown it. I have blown it. And then receiving the gift of forgiveness. So hopefully that's a little bit of encouragement to you, that if if you've been there, you just take that time, get away, get on, in a sense, your beach, and just come before the Lord and say, God, maybe this day, maybe you have something happen this morning, or something happened last night, or you've been being eaten up in the past of some stuff that you have done or said, and you just feel like I could never be forgiven. That's actually a lie from the pit of hell. Just get alone, come before the Lord. You're not going to tell him anything that he doesn't already know, but there's this power that happens when we confess our sins, we confess our wrongs, we confess maybe a lifestyle we've been living, we can confess an attitude, can confess just the way we maybe treated people wrongly. Just confess that before the Lord. And see, when we bring things into the light, and that's when God can work. It's when we keep things hidden, when we keep condoning our sins, when we keep thinking, it wasn't that bad, or everybody else does it. But when we come before him, when we come and confess to him, and it brings that sin into light, and then that's when God works. So hopefully you can keep joining with us there in Mark this month. Actually, we'll be in Mark through the middle of September. So join us, get your little sheets there. We have them in the office, or on Sunday mornings. You can grab one there. This Sunday, we are going to be celebrating communion together here in a couple days. And so hopefully you'll join us for that. On September 1st, the men are going to have a barbecue. So all the details are in the email that we're going to put out later today or on Sunday. And then on the 6th of September, then the men are going to be back. On the 6th of September, I'm sorry. On the 6th of September, we're starting here in the office a prayer course, an 8-week prayer course on going through the Lord's Prayer. And again, all the details there on Sunday mornings or through the email. And then on the 8th is, I think it's the 8th. Yeah, I'm looking at my notes there. But that next week, then too, maybe it is on the 6th too, that the women are going to got to come and get it. Check out the email because I'm kind of blowing it there. But the women are going to be starting a study on Romans. And so all looking very good, very excited, and hope to have you join us soon. Okay? God